All right, so as we're going on through the webinar, please feel free to use the chat box to throw in any questions. See, we already got people raising their hand. Haven't even gotten started. We will go through a slide presentation here. We're going to get started now, and the goal is to get you on your way with a hard stop at around 2 p.m. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, here we go. So today, obviously, you guys know we're talking about how to finance commissions into the deal, which is something that's probably pressing on your minds with all the changes here. It's going to be important to be resourceful. You'll see here one of our philosophies is it's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness. It's actually a quote from Tony Robbins. So you'll see that here in just a minute. But today, the outcome of the webinar is really going to be twofold. First, you're going to get 3 different options on how you can collect your fee, even when your buyer can't pay out of pocket. And then secondly, you're going to get an opportunity to better serve your clients and also a way to add an additional income stream in the process. So just to introduce myself, my name is Robert Lucido. I am the manager over at Moxie Mortgage, which is a mortgage company that was created first and foremost by real estate agents, for real estate agents to better serve their clients. The short of it is we're direct to wholesale, so we have no overhead. And so we basically pass those savings on to clients and then also to qualified agents, which we call business development managers. More on that in a second. But let's dive in. So when you guys go to the settlement table and your buyer has their closing costs, throw in the chat box, do they have the option of whether they want to pay their taxes or their transfer fees or their title fees? Is that an option for them? Can they turn that down? Yes or no? No. Now, if they have to bring 5% down, do they have the option of not bringing their down payment? No. So why is it that when we go to the settlement table for the last 20 years, if something's not working out, everyone looks to us and expects us to make the concession, even though we have a duly ratified agreement with our client that obligates us to whatever compensation fees were due? And so first and foremost, we need to have the same mindset. Commissions, fees are closing costs, and they should be treated as non-negotiable once they're beyond agreement. Once they reach the settlement table, they should be equally non-negotiable. So at that point, if that's our mindset, then it becomes, instead of, do I concede my commission? It becomes, how do I collect any deficiency left over? So let's dive in. What happens if the buyer doesn't have enough to cash to close? As we just mentioned, commissions are a closing cost. Treat them as any other closing cost, and it must be paid. So again, it becomes, how do we collect it? And this anchors into an overarching mindset. On one side of the equation, you'll have people that will look at these changes as a challenge. My business is already scarce. This just makes it harder. This will hurt my business because the seller's not paying my fee, and so forth. But there'll also be a portion of the industry who errs on the side of a more positive outlook. So they'll see those challenges instead as opportunities. So instead of business is scarce, this just makes it harder. It becomes, this will allow me to seize market share as the number of agents thin out. Or this will hurt my business because the seller isn't paying my fee. That becomes, I'm now in charge of determining and collecting my fee. It's much more empowering. And so if you have the right mindset, you'll be very successful with the strategies we're about to show you. So I'll skip ahead here. Now, it's important to define a term before we get too far in. Whenever we say compensation deficiency, what we simply mean is the amount that we and our brokerage is due in the transaction is greater than the amount the seller has agreed to pay. Very simple. The amount of money we're due is greater than what the seller has agreed to pay. That's a compensation deficiency. And as I mentioned before, it's not about your lack of resources or your buyer's lack of resources. It's about a lack of resourcefulness. So for the last 20 years, if you were due a certain percentage and the seller was only willing to pay half of that, many agents just settled for half of that instead of being resourceful to collect the remaining deficiency. We want you to be bold, headstrong in collecting every cent you're due. So first of the three solutions, this is the most expected, but we're going to go a little bit deeper into the ins and outs of it. So very first is the ability to request seller concessions, which is everything that you probably have expected. The other two will be much more creative. But on the first one here, you may say in the past few years, it's hard to get seller concessions. The good news is we're shifting towards a buyer's market. Inventory levels nationwide are now at 2008 levels. And so as it shifts more and more into a buyer's market, you'll be in a stronger negotiation position to ask for concessions and actually win those deals with concessions included. We're seeing it increase across the board right now with our business. Secondarily, in the past, there were limits on how much a seller could concede based upon the loan type and the down payment if we're talking about conventional mortgages. The good news is that is no longer applicable when dealing with commissions. Those, whatever amount of concessions goes towards commissions will be above and beyond the loan limits. So that's another big break in your favor as you're negotiating seller concessions. You no longer have to worry about limits based upon down payment or loan type. And then lastly, this is really important on the VA side. VA buyers are now allowed to pay commissions as well. So across the board, you have three different factors here that are now shifting different dynamics in your favor. You know, markets are of course local. However, nationwide, you can see trends are very clear across the board. And so it's only a matter of time. And then secondly, you now no longer have to worry about loan limits. And third, VA buyers are now able to pay commissions as well. So that's number one. And again, throw your questions in the chat box if you have them. We'll circle back to them here in a minute. Number two is to negotiate seller concessions and finance them into the deal. Now, what does that mean? Now, when you are seeking to negotiate a deal, you need to actually be a negotiator. Your client has hired you as an agent, which means you have agency duty. They are empowering you to negotiate on their behalf. But far too often, agents act as messengers instead of negotiators. In other words, they relay an offer, they take the response back to their client, and they're just being a middleman going back and forth. We're going to show you how to actually be a negotiator in these situations to get the deal won for your client on the best possible terms and to include your compensation in the process. So here's a scenario. A house is listed at $500,000. The buyer agent compensation that's being offered is 3%. In other words, $15,000. The seller concession offered is 1%. Sorry, I misspoke there. The buyer agent compensation was 3% and the seller concession being offered was 1%. So obviously we have a compensation deficiency here of $10,000 or 2%. So how do we handle this with approach number two? So we will submit the offer for $500,000 requesting the 3% seller concessions, which was strategy number one. If that listing agent comes back with a counter, and let's just use easy numbers. Let's say they come back and say, look, we will do it for $500,000, but it's going to be 2%, not 3% in seller concessions. At this point, most agents would just settle for 2%, but we want you to be, headstrong in getting the remaining 3%. So here's one solution for you to do that. We're looking now for $5,000, not the full 15, just $5,000. So how can we get that? So what we will do is negotiate it in this scenario. So instead of being the messenger, they come back and say $500,000 for 2% seller concession. If you can do the math in your head, that's a net number of $490. So Mr. Seller, it sounds like, or Mr. Listing Agent, it sounds like your seller is willing to accept the deal if it's a net to them of $490,000. Yes, that's correct. Well, how about this? What if we purchase the property for $505,000? Conditioned upon a full 3% seller concession, because those seller concessions are really important to my client, and without them, we can't get this deal to happen. They go back to their client, they confirm it's the same net number they're willing to accept, except now you're getting a win for them and a win for your client and a win for yourself in the process. So at that point, they can either accept or decline. If they decline, you still have a remaining option. We'll get into that with number 3. But I wanted to underscore one important factor with this strategy. So the baseline situation was $500,000, 10% down. And as of a couple weeks ago, let's just say it was 7% mortgage interest rate. So the monthly payment was $3,606 in this scenario. If you're going to use this strategy to collect another percent of your commission, that would equate to the 505 purchase from the scenario we just gave you, holding the 10% down payment the same and the 7% interest rate the same. Just that small change in terms increases the interest rate, or excuse me, the monthly payment to $36.38. Now, you don't have to be a math major to know that's just $32 per month. If you factor in tax deductions, that's going to take on average around 22 years for your buyer to break even on that. In other words, there's no reason why you shouldn't be financing commissions into the deal if you need to. If it's only going to cost them $32 per month, it takes them 22 years. Most people won't own a house for that long. So that's one scenario where you can make the deal happen, collect your full fee, and do it in a way that's not going to, make your buyer come out of pocket for the full $5,000. Instead, just increase their monthly payment by $32 moving forward. Now, one other factor on this just to keep in mind is that when we're inflating the purchase price and increasing the seller concessions, we can only increase the loan amount in accordance with the down payment, of course. So if they're planning to put 10% down and they still want to put 10% down, then they would have to bring $500 additional in cash to close. So they're not going to have to come out of pocket for the full $5,000, instead just $500. Or if they can still qualify, we can just decrease the down payment percentage and hold everything the same. So that's number 2. Number 3, finance the lender credit into the loan. So I'm going through the chat box here. I see a few things pop up. So I'll just go ahead and stop screen share and pause for a quick second and answer a couple questions for you guys because I see it popping up a lot. Give me one second. All right, so appraisal being the biggest issue. Correct. Appraisal is the one limitation with strategy number 2. Now, when you have the option, let's say in scenario 1, the deal is dead, you walk away from it. Let's say there's a 20% chance it doesn't appraise for the new purchase price. Well, you still have an 80% chance of winning. So you're going to take it or just walk away from it. We're trying to give you additional solutions. Now, what we encourage agents we work with to do is if ever you have a contract on a house that you think is in possible danger of not appraising, we want to be super proactive. We want to make sure the appraiser is from the local area. We want to make sure that we have comps available for that appraiser. We want to do everything we can proactively to maximize the chance of it appraising. Fortunately, if you follow that, we have a very high rate of it actually appraising. Appraisers are looking often for ways to justify the value of the contract. So if we can be proactive, you have a high chance of actually making that happen. Especially because like in that scenario, we're just trying to finance $5,000 into the deal. So instead of appraising for $500,000, it just has to appraise for $505. We have a high chance of that actually happening. But regardless, keep that in mind. Appraisal is the one limitation on that strategy. Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation from local organizations or particularly the media. We've had no issue doing this. Again, commissions are just closing costs. All we're doing is agreeing between two parties, mutually agreeing to purchase a property for a set amount with a term of a seller concession, and the buyer has the liberty of using those concessions as they wish. Let's see what else. The client is paying $32 a month for 22 years. Okay, no, let's back up. So what I was saying is if they purchase the property with the 505 purchase instead of the 500,000 even purchase price, their monthly payment holding interest rate the same would be just $32 more. So again, put it simply, by purchasing it for 505 instead of 500, their monthly payment goes up $32 a month. But remember, they can write off their interest. And so when you take that into account with an average tax rate, it's going to take them 20 to 22 years on average to break even. In other words, when that amount after taxes will equal the $5,000 that they financed into the deal. All right. Okay. So let's pop back. We can circle back for more questions here in just a minute, but I want to walk you through strategy number 3. So even if you request concessions and you come up short or you come up empty there, and even if you also increase the purchase price and finance a portion of the deal and you still come up short, there's still an additional option here. And this wouldn't really be subject to any appraisal limitations. So this is a strategy that you can also use in replacement of the seller concessions based upon if your confidence not going to appraise. Here's an option you could use either in place of that or in addition to that. And so what this means is, instead of increasing the purchase price, what we're going to do is we're going to increase the interest rate with a corresponding lender credit to your client. So let's say we came up short by that $5,000. And so we want to increase the purchase price, the interest rate, and a lender credit to cover that $5,000 to your buyer. This is a really good strategy for 2 reasons. First, it gets around the appraisal limitation. But with Moxie and agents we work with, one of the benefits we also provide are no-cost refinances. So oftentimes you can essentially find free money for your client in the deal. I remember earlier this year, we found about $10,000 of free money by going up the rate sheet for someone because their biggest concern was limiting their cash to close. So we were able to go up the rate sheet and get a $10,000 lender credit to them to defray their closing costs, with the plan of getting them refied in about 6 payments. So with Moxie and with agents we work with, no-cost refinances are one of the perks we provide, again, to help your clients and help you provide more value. But back to it. So instead of increasing the purchase price, we're going to increase the interest rate. So instead of 6.5, let's go to a 7% interest rate in this scenario. So 500,000, 10% down, the client would have been at 6.5. Their monthly payment would be $34.56. Now in this scenario, we're going to keep the purchase price the same, the down payment the same, and increase the interest rate to 7 1/8. This was pricing as of 2 weeks ago, by the way. So right now rates have dropped even further, but this was pricing as of 2 weeks ago. So in this scenario, the monthly payment would go up $188 a month. In exchange, they would get a $5,000 lender credit. As of 2 weeks ago, it was $5,200 exactly. So this client, it would take about 55 months for them to break even on this strategy, which means you roughly have, you have a little over 4 years before to refinance this client. And they essentially have free money at that point if we refinance them at any point in the first 55 months. But this is yet another way for you to be creative, helping your client cover the agreed upon fees that you are due without having to come out of pocket, is with a lender credit. Now, one really important factor that you need to keep in mind is that lenders will assume the seller is paying all commissions in addition to any concessions unless told otherwise. Even before the rule changes, lenders do not have access to the MLS. Now, after the rule changes, there is no compensation information on the MLS. So lenders are really flying in the dark here, and the obligation is on you to communicate how fees are being paid. Otherwise, lenders will assume that the seller is paying all commissions and any concessions. So one of the ways that we help agents do that is we've developed a whole system in our back end, and all it amounts to on your side of things is completing this one-page form. And so I'm going to walk you quickly through this. This one-page form is simply just instructions to Moxie and the closing attorney / title company on how to process commissions for this deal. First section is very simple. You're just going to identify the property address, the buyer, the seller. And you're simply going to stipulate in the first section that the buyer has agreed to compensation of X%. And if there's a brokerage fee, you can put that in there as well, like a transaction fee. And the seller has agreed to pay the buyer's broker compensation in the amount of X. Now, what you'll notice is these three sections are redundant intentionally. You're basically going to provide the information in three different ways to make it perfectly clear so there's no misunderstanding. Because if you've worked hard to earn a client and you've worked hard to secure compensation and then you worked hard for months to actually earn it, we want to make sure that every cent owed to you is processed properly. So this is another unique benefit with Moxie, is that, we're really putting you guys first and foremost, your clients first and foremost, to make sure that everything is processed effectively. So let me show you how you would fill out the second part of the form here using this basic scenario: $500,000 purchase price. The seller is offering 0%. The buyer agents do 3%. The seller agrees to cover the deficiency in exchange for higher sale price, which was strategy number 2. So that means we have buyer agent compensation due is $15,000. The brokerage services fee, let's say this brokerage has a $395 transaction fee. And the compensation offered by the seller per the listing agreement was 0. That means we have a $15,000, $395 deficiency. So we're going to increase the purchase price by the equivalent amount, $515,395. And the seller paid closing costs for compensation. Let's say it's $15,000. The buyer paid compensation closing costs would be $395 in this scenario, and there's nothing left over. So again, this is just showing an itemized breakdown of exactly what's going on so that our loan officers can make sure that the loan is set up properly, disclosed accordingly, and then the processors are setting everything up in the back end to make sure that when that final CD is put out, it matches all expectations. This is important because, again, if you don't communicate it, the initial loan estimate will be set up having the seller cover all commissions. We had a deal a couple months ago where the agent didn't communicate properly. And so when the initial loan estimate went out, it showed the seller paying both sides commissions plus 2.5% in concessions. So then when it was balanced and with title and the truth came out with the contract by talking to the agents, it led to a $20,000 swing in the cash to close on the CD. That's exactly aligned to the terms of the contract. But the problem is when the LE goes out, that's what your client is expecting. And so even though the CD was 100% accurate to their offer, their expectation was they were bringing $20,000 cash to close. And now 2 days before settlement, they had to bring 40. So make sure you communicate. And then the final section is just a summary. So you're just going to say, hey, this is what's being paid by the seller on the seller side. This is what's being paid by the buyer on the buyer side. Then you'll sign and date it. And this form, this one-page form, this will be provided to you with your first deal with Moxie. So whenever you will submit your contract, and anytime you have a contract where the financing is with Moxie, all you'll do is fill out that one-page form here. I'll go back to the full shot and submit that with your contract, and our team will know exactly what to do from there. Now, just wrapping up here, next steps. So if you do have a deal and you do want to finance commissions into the deal with Moxie, it's a very simple process. Have your buyers apply at moxie.flowify.com. Again, that's moxie.flowify.com. And when you submit the contract, a ratified contract, make sure you submit that important instructions form we just walked through with that contract. And then simple, We average clear to close in 10 to 12 days. We can go extremely quickly. We've cleared to close a loan in 2 days even, and you'll get paid your fee. So again, just being proactive with that one-page form, working with Moxie, you now have 2 additional strategies at your disposal to collect your full fee. Now, lastly, I promised you 2 outcomes from this webinar. One was 3 strategies to finance commissions into the deal. The second promise was how you can add an additional income stream. And so what that looks like is for qualified agents with qualified level of production, you can actually become a business development manager for Moxie Mortgage, which means you're a W-2 employee, fully RESPA compliant, and you can earn income off mortgage business you generate. So if that interests you, please go ahead and scan this QR code. Fortunately, it's just a 60-minute onboarding call once you're approved. And after that 60-minute onboarding call, you're ready to rock to start earning mortgage income from your existing business. Again, 60-minute onboarding call. We'll execute those W-2 agreements. Ramp up time is less than a week. And then you're on your way to lower rates, improved value prop, faster turn times, virtually any loan imaginable. We work with over 250 wholesale lenders and thousands of products. And then you'll get the expert support and benefits from our LOs, including how to process deals with commissions in, and of course, make more money in the process, which is going to be really important for buyer agents moving forward. One last piece is for any agent we work with. So if we've done one deal with you and or if you become a business development manager, you will also receive your own custom branded portal. So it's another way to put your brand front and center as when working with buyers. So again, I'm Robert Lucido. Thank you so much for attending today. I will open it up to answer questions in the chat box here as we wrap up in the next couple minutes on time. Let's see what we got here. You don't have to be a broker. No, you can be an agent or have a team. No conflict of interest. You're allowed to have multiple jobs. That's also been made abundantly clear in RESPA Section 8C. So you're allowed. In fact, you could even become a loan officer, a full loan officer, and do the loans for your clients as well and represent both aspects of the equation. So there's really no limitation here. We're fully RESPA compliant, and we'll make sure everything's above board and disclosed. There will be a recording posted. Yep, I'll put the QR code back up for you guys right now as I answer these questions. You have to, not sure what you mean, Kristen, by do you have to do this with all lenders? We work with over 250 different wholesale lenders. Most retail lenders won't do this or won't have the ability to do it because they're very bureaucratic. And again, they follow everything according to the top tier. We don't have any issue with that because again, we are set up from the agent side, thinking with you guys in mind. Yeah, and obviously with all the considerations around litigation, we'll be, if you email me, we'll be able to tell you all the compensation. It is pretty significant compensation you can earn, but I can't disclose that on the call here. Just send me an email or go ahead and scan the QR code and I get you that information right away. Yes, we have done closings in Virginia. We're licensed in 48 states right now. We're pending in Massachusetts and New York. We do work in California. The webinar will be posted on YouTube as well as I believe on Facebook. I'll be doing this one again for you guys here in a few weeks as well. Young just posted in the chat box. It'll be on the Facebook group as well. Technically, the third strategy could be done by lenders. Again, it's thinking outside the box and it requires a bit more work on our end. And oftentimes it's not really feasible with other lenders, especially if they're going to charge fees for origination on the refinance. It doesn't really work out for your client. It would cost them more money. So it's a unique benefit with Moxie. Again, because we're wholesale, we're specifically looking to pass those savings back to your client to make you more valuable as a buyer agent. So because we're not charging for the refinance, it makes that solution viable, as with other lenders, it would not. Let's see. Therefore, the lender will see. With the new forms, it'll depend. Art depends on the market. But again, err on the side of caution and make sure you're filling out that form, because there can be some confusion. In other words, was the seller agreeing to cover the compensation preemptively, or was that only through concessions? Because lenders won't necessarily be able to discern, or they'll make assumptions on how are these concessions being used, for what fees, and so forth. So you could run the risk of essentially double counting concessions, which can lead to big swings. So again, new forms that are being issued, I'm sure, will be a positive step forward in transparency, but it doesn't ever hurt to be even more transparent and make sure that fees are collected properly for you. Yeah, we do cross-qualify. Kristen, great question. So cross-qualification is a great strategy you can use even as a listing agent. The last thing you want to do is present your offers to one of your sellers and say, hey, this is the best offer to accept. And next thing you know, it's a bogus offer or it falls through. So this is a strategy that we also do for listing agents at no cost, which is essentially one of our loan officers can cross-qualify, which is about a 5-minute conversation with the buyer of one of your offers. And we can basically sift through some key elements to look to discern the validity of their pre-approval. Was it vetted as fully as it should? I'll mention with Moxie, we pre-qualify, we pre-approve our clients with full underwrite. So we're going to look at assets, liabilities, income, employment, credit before we issue that pre-approval. I can tell you many other lenders don't. In fact, we've had sellers accept offers with bogus pre-approvals that were generated online with 0 docs looked at, credit not pulled, nada, totally bogus. So again, cross-qualification is a good tool. Again, you can reach out if you're interested in that. All right, guys, we went 5 minutes over for questions. You guys had lots of questions. I'll do this again for you guys in 2 weeks. If you guys have any questions or you want to see it again. But again, the QR code's there. Go ahead and scan it. If you scan it and fill out the form, we'll be in contact here in the next few days. I'll reach out, have a conversation with you, answer any additional questions you may have. But again, look forward to working with you and helping you collect 100% of your fees that you work really hard and deserve to earn. I'll see you next time, guys. Thank you.